BC's Talent Agenda webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to be exploring a really important and relevant topic with you all. So before I start and introduce the topic and our amazing panel of speakers today, I just want to remind you to please feel free to pop any questions or insights you have into the chat. We'll look at them as we go and we try to answer your questions to the best of our ability. So today we'll be discussing quite an important topic given the current environment and world of remote working since COVID. And that is, how do we secure world-class leaders in Africa? So how can African companies kind of secure world-class African leaders and compete with international firms who are recruiting for roles outside of the continent? So obviously, with the world of work becoming more remote, we've become more aware how, we can recruit people from all over the world if they're sitting in Africa, and get them to work for more international companies. So that is a certain kind of issue or potential issue for Africa and our ability to tap into the right kind of talent. So today we want to just explore that topic and see what are the solutions and gain any insights around it. So as I mentioned, I'm extremely honored to be surrounded by really great, intelligent and industry leaders in the field of human resources in Africa. So I will be handing over to them in just a second to introduce themselves, because I definitely wouldn't be able to do them justice if I had to introduce them. But before I hand over, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. As you can see, I'm Megan. I'm the managing consultant from Ferva. And Ferva is a team of industrial psychologists or organizational psychologists, however you want to refer to it. And we kind of tap into the world of SMEs within South Africa. And we help with anything to do with people at work. So leadership development, organizational culture, as well as figuring out retention strategies and strategic kind of attraction of the right employees. So that's a little bit about me. I will be handing over to Dion to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his experience in the field and his company.
Thank you so much, Megan. So welcome to everybody this morning. My name is Dion de Swart. I'm one of the managing partners at a company called APAC, for short, Africa People Advisory Group. I often wonder whether we are still a startup. We're about 2.5 years old. We are 3 partners that started the business, and we work across the African continent and across the full human resources, human capital value chain. I've got extensive experience in human resources, having worked for the Old Mutual Group as the head of HR for Africa for a few years, and then also spent a couple of years with a large consulting firm before being brave and starting our own organization. So that's a little bit more about me. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. And wow, we really wish you success on this journey. I see that we have one of your colleagues here, Nicole. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in the field.
Thank you very much, Megan. So my name is Nicole. I often don't know how to pronounce it myself anymore, but for those of you who are familiar with Johannesburg, there's quite a big road called William Nicol, and apparently it's going to be renamed to Winnie Madikizela Mandela Drive. So happy to go with Winnie or with William Nicol, whichever one you can remember. Similar to Dion, I've got a background in consulting. I've got a finance and legal background from a qualifications point of view. And since I can remember, I've had this deep-rooted passion for the continent, and I've been very fortunate to have worked across 45 countries in Africa in the management consulting space, in 130 countries globally, advising organizations from a talent and people point of view, coupling this expertise of legal and finance from that point of view. Thank you very much, Megan.
Great. Thank you so much, William Nicol. Really great insight and a lot of awesome experience. Now I'm going to hand over to Bess. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into who you are.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bess Kosana. I work for the yellow brand MTN, We believe that everyone deserves the benefits of a modern connected life. I've been with the company for the past 3 years, looking after the 17 opcos in the African region, where I support the HR heads in terms of implementing the HR strategy that we drive from a group perspective. I'm also responsible for hiring talent for the group in terms of expatriate management. So all the senior leaderships, our CEOs, our GMs in the opcos, we are responsible for hiring them and bringing them board on into MTN. I've been in HR for over 26 years. I've been a generalist. I've worked in many industries from telecoms, IT, banking, retail, manufacturing, you name it. Very extensive experience. My previous job, I was with Samsung as head of Africa for Samsung, where I looked after Samsung Africa for them. So I'm looking for today's discussion. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Bess. Really extensive experience. I'm very excited to learn from all of you. So I'm just going to go straight into discussing the topic. And I think I'm going to direct my first question to you, Bess. So given the relevance of this topic, have you experienced a shortage of experienced leaders in Africa currently? Is it something that your company is struggling with?
Megan, yes, definitely. I mean, we do a lot of hiring in Africa, and obviously, we all are fishing in the same pond, which is very dry at the moment. There is a shortage of talent due to the fact that many of us are looking in the same pond. It is not easy to hire for Africa because everybody is looking in the same pond. Some of the challenges of why we experience shortages is because of geopolitical reasons. People do not, there are countries that people would prefer not to work in. People would prefer the Nigerias, the Ghana, the South Africa. And then if you're trying to attract someone and telling them to go to Afghanistan or go to Guinea-Bissau or Conakry, it's a big no. It's a very difficult one. And not only geopolitical reasons, but also lack of infrastructure. Those are some of the things that people consider in terms of access to hospitalization, easy transportation. The cost of living also in Africa is quite high. Those are some of the things that people look into, and they prefer not to come to Africa. But we do try our best in order to encourage people to say, come home and let's see how we can help you settle home in a much easier way, because there is a lot of African talent sitting overseas that actually does want to come home, but we will expand on that further as we continue. Thanks.
Thank you. And when you talk about Nigeria and South Africa, is there still a struggle to recruit for top positions in those countries, or is that a little bit easier?
That is a little bit easier, Megan. We found people would rather come to Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa because there is infrastructure, particularly South Africa and Ghana, politically safe, and not much crime, not much issues in terms of crime and wars and things like that. So in that instance, we attract people not only in Africa, but even out of Africa. Europeans, Americans were able to attract those people. Some people love to go to Cape Town. It's fine. We've adopted anytime, anywhere work. So wherever you want to sit, we'll support it. As long as you come and support us in driving our strategy and achieving our vision, we are open. So some countries are much easier to recruit for, some are not.
Okay, thank you. Dion, have you experienced any kind of feedback from the clients you work with in terms of the difficulty here with retaining and recruiting African leaders?
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I wanted to say, Bess, of course, you've got a really nice brand to work for. It does make a big difference if you've got a strong brand that kind of paints the whole continent yellow. We are definitely finding feedback from clients that, especially at senior levels, they are struggling to attract the right kind of talent. And I think certainly in South Africa, in my experience, once you've attracted the top talent, it's also about how you retain it. And being a Cape Townian myself and having worked for a large corporate here, we often found that when you recruit a talent here, they wouldn't stay. They, especially if you come from Joburg, a lot of people would want to move back to Joburg. So we've certainly seen across the continent clients struggling. I'm thinking of a couple of clients that we're working with that are trying to attract expats. There definitely is difficulty. So what we're finding is that you definitely need to be thinking about paying a premium. You need to be thinking about what's the kind of benefits that you offer. You need to be thinking about things like flexibility. But we've certainly found across some of the larger firms that we're working with quite a big struggle to find the appropriate talent in the local markets, but then also in the expatriate market, and certainly it comes at a big price tag.
Yeah, and I think even if they're living somewhere else and they're working for an African country, often the currency doesn't allow them to kind of live the right kind of life experience in an overseas country. So I think that can be quite an obstacle as well.
Yeah, so I think what you find often with the senior talent is that they might not be paid in the local currency, because you often find that they lose value over time as the local currency weakens against, let's say, the pound or the US dollar. So in my experience, I've often seen, especially your senior leaders that come from elsewhere, potentially being paid in a different currency to the local one, just to hedge that risk.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Dion. Yes, I'm just going to go back to you just because you referred to this earlier on.
Yes.
I'm not sure if anyone else can hear that echo.
Yeah, there is a little bit of an echo.
Very slight, yeah.
Okay, cool. When you guys are not talking, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourselves to eliminate that. Okay, great. So, Bess, I was just referring back to what you said earlier on, where you said that you do have some recruitment strategies for filling these executive roles at your company. So I would like you to kind of just talk about a little bit about what are those recruitment strategies and what is your company doing to ensure that you're not kind of not being able to tap into that right market.
Okay. So, Megan, first of all, we believe in our own internal candidates. So we do look internally first. We do have a list of succession candidates. There are a number of programs that we run internally where we develop and grow our successors. We do have a pool of successors that we look into and we advertise internally and try and give our own internal people opportunities. But also concurrently, depending on the positions, we would also use LinkedIn. We would also then use headhunters, especially some of the more difficult technical positions. We do use a lot of headhunting to try and assist us to bring that talent on board. So there are a number of avenues. There are also a lot of referrals that we get in-house from people who just approach us and tell us they're interested in joining MTN, and they register themselves over our website. So there is a number of talent that really is interested in joining the Yellow brand itself.
Okay, great. And then, Nicole, obviously we don't all have the amazing brands of MTN. What other things can companies do, or what have you seen work in your experience to make sure that we're attracting these top talents in Africa?
So, Megan, brand definitely goes a long way, right? Because with brand comes a level of trustworthiness within an organization. MTN specifically has been on the continent, great geographical footprint for a number of years. And there's this component in investing. It says it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market. And what the opportunities that are there for people that potentially lack brand is that they have the opportunity to create opportunity for people in building their careers, to be part of something amazing on the continent. Kind of see Africa as this future final frontier for multinationals to conquer. So I think we as a continent, we have often find ourselves as the place where consumer goods are sold, but not necessarily foreign direct investment is set up for capital project investments, for infrastructure investments, in education, in healthcare, in policy making. And we have the unique opportunity to be part of this future that I see we can create for ourselves as an African continent. So opportunity in career, opportunity in exploration, and also opportunity in experimentation. Because the market is so diverse, I mean, we are often talking about this population that we have across the continent. If we neglect for a moment to view it as 52 or 54, 55 individual countries, but see it as a collective, it really, in my view, is a world superpower. And the ability to form in blocks, and I think for me, this blocks component talks about relationships. In Africa, we do business built on relationships, and the ability to foster these long-term relationships can really stand any person in good stead that has the risk appetite to do business across the continent. So brand is exceptional, but you know what? Greatness is also built from the ground up. MTN at one stage, not too long ago, I mean, less than 30 or so years ago, was a startup as well. And now it's this massive conglomerate. And we've got the same to say for clients like EcoBank that's across the continent, Safaricom. It all started somewhere. And if we believe in ourselves, then we have the ability to create the new unicorns that the world is waiting to give rise to.
Amazing. Very well said. And I think there is great opportunity in our continent. And I think relationship-based kind of attraction is very important, specifically in Africa and how we connect with one another. My next question, and I guess I'll kind of direct it to all of you, and whoever wants to answer can answer, is if there is let's say, a shortage of African talent, are we happy to start recruiting international players? So what I mean is people who are from other continents, not necessarily previous, previous Africans, citizens. Is there a need and a want to get international players from other continents to come work in our continent? So yeah, kind of hand over to who wants to answer.
I'm happy to take a first stab at it. So I think there are times where getting international talent in the absence of local talent or diaspora talent is really important. And I think there's a lot of value to be added. But I think there's also risk elements. So I think, people that operate across the continent know, first thing, to get a work permit for a foreigner in countries like Kenya and so forth is exceptionally difficult. So I've seen, certainly when I worked for Old Mutual, exchange programs that if you want to bring a South African to Kenya, then you take a Kenyan to South Africa. So it's kind of almost an exchange program. So there certainly are issues and limitations as far as things like work permits are concerned. I think one of the bigger concerns me in bringing the international talent, as much as I support it, and I think it's important, is to really understand the local context and to respect and appreciate local cultures, local customs, local understanding. I recently engaged with a company that brought a very senior expat in. And the way that I saw that expat engage and operate within that organization, for me, was a big concern, because they had all of the technical skills and they certainly had all of the qualifications and, a really, really good resume. But what they lacked was the understanding of the continent and the particular country that they operate in. And I remember starting in 2008 in my first Africa-based job, and the MD on my first day said to me, "Dion, if I can give you one piece of advice, be very conscious of how you engage and don't go in like, I dare to say many South Africans go in as all knowing and superior. Go in with an appreciation of what you're working with, who you're working with, and really understand the cultural and business nuances before you start making change and engaging in a different way." So I think bringing international talent in is really important because it brings in diversity. And I think in many markets, there is the need to challenge traditional thinking and traditional norms. And I'll give you a very simple example. We do a lot of work in the space of job evaluation. And in many of the companies that we work with, we see a tenure-based grading system. Now, if you want mediocrity in your organization, then have a tenure-based grading system that guarantees a promotion after 3 years and holds back highly talented people from getting promoted within that 3-year period. So I think there is the need to challenge some of the existing systems and norms, but with an appreciation of the culture and the country that you work in, and also understanding working in Kenya is not the same as working in Tanzania, and working in Ghana is not the same as working in, in some of the other markets. So that'll be, for me, I think, a key thing to consider.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in and give a little bit more insight? Bess, you're on mute.
Oh, I've removed myself from mute. Can you hear me now?
Right. Yes.
All right, great, thanks. I definitely agree with Dion. Cultural intelligence is very key if you want to bring in someone into the African space. Not only that, social intelligence, spiritual intelligence, because we have a lot of great people coming through, but if they cannot adapt to the culture and the political nuances and respect the laws of the country and come in with a bit of humility, they will struggle in the OPCOs. So we do very much encourage hiring people from overseas. The reason being, we bring them in as mentors, as coaches, to train some of our people. Right now, MTN is driving their strategy called Ambition 2025, which looks of how to move our business from not only being a telco business, but to a techno business. That means we need people with digital skills, people with mobile banking skills, people with fiber core skills, etc. And most of these skills, we're finding them overseas. We need people who understand how to do cloud computing, AI, platforms, etc. So we do try and attract those people, whether they're sitting in Italy, in the US, wherever they might be sitting. And what we try and do, obviously, most of the positions would be based in South Africa at head office where we're driving the strategy. So it's easier to attract a person to come to Johannesburg or be based in Cape Town. But we do use them, they are on a contract basis. And part of the condition of their service is to train and mentor our local employees. Because as Dion mentioned, work permits do become an issue. When you bring in a foreigner, you are given a limited work permit, and part of the agreement is that they must hand over the skills. So for us, that is very key, that whoever comes in has to be someone who understands the culture, who understands the political and economic environment, what we call generally a global expatriate with a global mindset. That is what we require, and those people should ensure that they're able to mentor and coach our local people as part of their contract of employment whilst employed here. So we do employ quite a few. Some we've even introduced what we call virtual commutes. What we mean by virtual commutes, you can work for us sitting in your home country, whether it be Italy or Australia, and we contract you in terms of deliverables, and then we expect you at least to visit our head office or whichever office you're working for at least once a quarter. And also visit in the beginning when you obviously need to meet the local people, understand the local nuances, meet the team as well, ensure that you're clear in terms of deliverables and what is expected. So we do also have a combination of anytime, anywhere work, where you can sit in Cape Town or work from home, but we also have virtual expatriates, which are sitting overseas and actually supporting our OPCOs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bess. That's really interesting. I just want to make a comment around the different questions and comments in the chat. We do see you. We will be spending a little bit of time at the end answering your questions. So please keep them coming. We're not ignoring you. We will definitely get to them. Something that's come up is, it seems like one of the best ways to kind of secure world-class African leaders is through promoting and coaching internally. So taking your existing talent and ensuring that we retain them. what are some ways, Nicole, that you feel is the best way to kind of retain employees in Africa and ensure that they remain in our country or continent?
I think the easiest way is to ask people what would make them stay, right? We often refer to this triangle in our business, talks about contractual agreements, experiential agreements, and then purpose alignment. And if individuals align to the purpose of your business, you really have to do very little to keep them there because they believe in what they are contributing to. There's a higher level of alignment. So from a practical point of view, I often would say, what are the things that are important to the individual? Often that is their family. And in an African context, it can also be extended family. If I have the ability to connect with my employees on an emotional level by taking care for that which is most important to them, often their family, there would be very little need for me to motivate them. They would have that internal motivation themselves. So when I think about just education as an example, if we have the ability to pay for the education of the children of employees, we will almost be knocking off two essential components: retain people, but also contribute to the general upliftment of the future through great education. Of course, there's something like paying more money, giving a better house, but these are contractual arrangements. There's always another organization with a bigger wallet, with a capex and not the opex budgets that they're working with. So that makes a big difference for organizations depending on where they are. But this whole purpose alignment thing is for me of great value, is to say it shouldn't be a job, it should be a sense of belonging. Malcolm Gladwell speaks about the sense of belonging. And if you don't have that sense of belonging, you're probably in the wrong company. And the right company does exist for you that you will be able to achieve that. There's many factors, but I really think this connection on a purpose level and on an emotional level has the ability to create sustainability, rather just saying who can pay more, what is better short-term benefits, and really taking a long-term view on the approach that organizations adopt, Megan.
Thank you. And I think I definitely agree with that. At Fervor, we've built a tool called Pulse Motivation, where we look at what drives and motivates people and to what degree is that kind of motivator being fulfilled by the organization. And very contrary to what people would expect, financial rewards and financial security, although it's always important, is always probably fourth or fifth on the list of what really drives and motivates people, with work-life balance, career advancement, self-improvement usually being at the top of the list. So I think that's really relevant to what you're saying. It's not just about money, but how can you better yourself in the company? What other opportunities are there for you? And how do we gain that sense of belonging? Cool. Thank you. Something I just wanted to ask Bess is, when you're sitting in an interview with like a senior leader, someone you're really trying to attract, what do you kind of put forward as your selling points? Why would you convince them to come back to Africa if they're living somewhere else?
We believe at MTN. MTN is a purpose-driven organization, as Nicole rightfully said. As I said in the beginning, we believe that everyone deserves the benefit of a modern, connected life. So if you are passionate about people and you are passionate about making a difference, that is the number one reason you should join MTN. Don't join us because you want us to pay you a big fat salary. It's not going to work. You need to be passionate about making a difference in the African continent. There is still lots of opportunities in the market. There's a lot of untapped business in the market, in the African market. And we believe that if you join us as a leader, you know that you can bring in the best of yourself. You'll bring in your heart, your mind, your spirit, your soul to make a difference on the continent. We want leaders that are purpose-led, leaders that want to make a difference, leaders that want to develop other people within the organization, leaders that want to bring a difference within that country and work with the local government, involve themselves in terms of the ESG projects, partner with the governments in those countries in ensuring that they have the best telecom and techno services in that country. Those are the things that are important. The cultural fit is very important from an MTN perspective. We also do have a great employee value proposition that talks about being connected to developed, that talks about thriving in positivity, also working with meaning, etc. And people can choose out of this EVP what is important to them. Is it about my development and my succession? Is it about how do I give back to the community? Is it about how do I ensure the well-being of our employees and ensure diversity and inclusion in the region? Because that's also some of the challenges you find in the regions, that some countries are still very much, they hire people of the same culture, people that they're comfortable with. And we're saying we are a diverse company. We offer diverse products to everyone in the community. So diversity and inclusion is very key when you work for MTN and you're able to put on that hat. We also believe that women in the region should be empowered. I know Africa can be very patriarchal and also try and push more hiring of males, but we say women also have a place in the marketplace. I mean, if you go out in the marketplace, since most of the people selling in the streets are the women, that's the interesting thing. Africa is where it is because of strong women who look after their households, who are small business vendors, who run small SMMEs. So those women should also be represented within our workplace. So those things are key for us. You need to have a passion. You need to be able to respect the laws of the country, build relationships with the local government and the local people, and make sure that you achieve the ambitions and the goals of MTN. And by doing so, you yourself will find personal satisfaction. This is one of the best jobs you can do on earth because it will touch and change your life in a manner that you've never seen. If you really want to get out of your comfort zone and experience life and experience what it means to be purpose-led, I would encourage you to work in the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bess. I feel extremely inspired. Dion, are you concerned about what the talent pool looks like in Africa in the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, I think the one way of looking at it is concern. The other way of looking at it is a level of excitement, because we know that there's a fairly young population on the African continent. I think COVID has obviously had an impact in the ability of people to move around. So as much as we might not be able to attract in the way that we could have, I think there is a very vast pool of talent that sits within many of the key markets. So I would probably turn it around and say, yes, there's a bit of concern, but there's also excitement. And I think we are going to find a more tech savvy, a more people-oriented kind of leader coming out into the future. We do an annual survey called New Ways of Working, where we try and tap into things like understanding the leadership competencies for the future, some of the people practices. And so I think we will find a very different kind of leader, but I believe they are there. We've got to go and look for them. I remember a particular talent conversation in one of my previous organizations, and one of the senior leaders in this talent review meeting made a comment that really stuck with me for many, many years. He said, we never take a leap of faith on talent. You want to have 100% accurate assessment. You want to make sure that, this person is going to succeed at all costs. But we hardly ever take a leap of faith. And certainly in the years that I worked for Old Mutual, I've seen them attract amazing talent, but I've also seen a couple of people kind of not necessarily being viewed that strongly. And then they leave and they come back later a few years with added experience and being able to add to the pot. And And I think it is, great leaders like Ralph Mapita, certainly in his time that he was with Old Mutual as well, that enabled that. So I think for me, there's a sense of excitement, and there definitely is a new kind of leader coming up. I do think, though, and it kind of links to the previous question and the response from Bess, there's quite a fundamental principle that many organizations in Africa have not yet adopted, and that's the approach of employee experience, or EX. It's a relatively new concept in the world of HR in Africa, fairly established in the rest of the world, and certainly in the research that we've seen, very few organizations are stepping up and starting to work with EX. And it really is an evolution of the employee value proposition to the next level. It's really building the organization around the employee, and that includes leaders. So I think there's a sense of excitement. I think we need to absolutely continue delving into the diaspora market, and where need be to bring in international talent. And when I attended the first GCC summit in London around about 2012, 2013 that I attended, there's one thing that really struck me in that meeting when we were engaging talent. Although people were living in the UK and they might have been Zimbabweans, Nigerians, Ghanaians, they didn't actually care which country they ended up with in Africa. And it was every single person. If it was Nigerian, they said, I don't care where I work, I just want to be back on the continent. So I think there is a great passion and certainly a big opportunity for leadership. But for me, also a different kind of leadership, a more people-centric, more tech-savvy, and almost a little bit more evolved than some of the older leaders that we're currently seeing, that we sometimes engage with.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that there's just some passion for Africa and what we can accomplish here, and the room for growth. I definitely feel it, and it appears that you guys seem quite passionate about it as well. Going back to the conversation we were having around, promoting from within and retaining our employees, how do we ensure that they get like the correct training, the correct development, the correct coaching to be the next world-class African leaders? Anyone want to kind of jump on that question?
So I'm happy to start. I think to be ready for opportunity, you need to be given opportunity, right? And there's great value in having a mentor and a coach, someone that has been there and done that. And I think often, not just in Africa, but globally, this concept of coach and mentor is overlooked. So I think that's an excellent starting point. Gary Vee, who's an entrepreneur from the US, says, you trust people enough to hire them, but you don't trust them enough to actually do their job. And I think that really struck me to say, hire someone and get them to do the job and ask them what they need to be successful in their specific career. It's different from individual to individual. Opportunities are bountiful, and it's just about opening, or let me rather say extending the trust to our own employees as much as possible. I know that, and Bess, you'll be best placed to talk about this. MTN's got an extensive coaching program across the organization. I've recently, maybe past 3 years now, have engaged and have a coach and a mentor. And it's just the ability to bounce off ideas. Like as a leader, as a CEO, can't talk to the board because the board's going to fire you. Can't talk to the CFO because you're going to fire the CFO. So it's actually quite a lonely position that you need to hold in an organization. But once again, I love this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's also the way that we should do business as a continent, as leaders. How do we do this together versus just trying to say, let me try and excel and try to perform? But how do we take this holistically together? And that concept of coaching and mentoring has strong roots in that as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think if I just look at my personal experience, I've definitely been mentored in my company by two amazing and very impressive women. And because of that, and because they've kind of taken me on to coach me and make me who I am, I feel extremely inspired to do that with the next kind of group of people that come into my company. So I think, the second you start that off, it just becomes like a give back situation where more and more people who appreciate the opportunities they were given, take that on. So I think that's great. Anyone else want to add around that?
Yeah, I think there's certainly no shortage of training across the continent. And I recently ran my first face-to-face workshop for a company in Tanzania that wanted to run the intervention in Dubai. And the dynamics and the experience and the interaction and the meaningfulness of the engagement, as much as I am in support of virtual training, face-to-face is just at a very, very different level. So I don't think it's that we don't have access to training across the continent. There's good quality content, but I think training also needs to be tied together with other interventions in order to make it stick. And that's where the coaching and the mentoring, the action learning work, the project work to really apply the knowledge becomes very, very important. But as far as access to training, a lot of it is available. So if we can hone it in the right way and we can have something that makes it sticky through coaching, mentorship, and so forth, I think that really is where the answer lies.
Right. Bess, anything to add?
Yes, Megan. I think for us, it's also mentoring coaching plays a huge role, but also we're very clear in terms of what it takes to move to the next level, in terms of defining the capabilities that are required. Because a lot of employees get stuck because they don't know what it takes to move to the next level. And those capabilities need to be defined both from a technical perspective, but also from a behavioral perspective. Because a lot of people are technically sound, but they might struggle with the soft skills of how do I influence the board, of how do I build strategic relationships, especially how do I also make sure that I am heard, I'm influential, my strategy is sound, and I understand what is happening with my strategy. So those are some of the skills where we really need to hone our people into, but also give them exposure. If, for instance, you are grooming someone to become the next CEO, what exposure do you give that person to perhaps sit in a board meeting, to perhaps go with another CEO and visit the regulator? That type of exposure into the markets, because that in itself makes a huge difference. Practical exposure and learning on the job plays a very important role. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've touched on a really good point, and it's an error we see a lot of our clients make is someone's exceptionally talented technically, and because they're the best at what they do, they're said, okay, cool, now you're a manager or now you're a leader. But they're not given the skills or the development tools to be a good leader. So yes, they're exceptional at what they do, but no one's kind of helped them or coached them with the people skills that make you a good leader. And we always say, you wouldn't say one day to an engineer, okay, today you're now the accountant of the business. You would help them and develop them and give them the right skills. So why don't we do that with leaders? Why do we just promote them without equipping them with the necessary skills? So I think that's a really good point.
If you allow me to add to that, Megan, I think that in my experience, what's been really interesting is that you often don't get at a middle management level in a large corporate in South Africa the opportunity to work with a board and government. And many of the positions at middle management and senior management level at many of the African-based organizations give you a very different level of exposure, especially in working with boards, working with remuneration committees. Not that that is an enviable task to work with remuneration committees, but engaging a board chairperson and being part of the board or meeting with regulators and government officials is a big selling point in attracting people to the African continent. And If I think about the time that I was with Old Mutual and I look at my peers, the other HR executives in other units, none of them, with the exception of one unit, had the opportunity to engage with the kind of leaders that I did, having the opportunity to meet with government officials. And I think when you think about attracting people back, that for me is a massive selling point and a development point, is the opportunity to really get exposure, even in a small organization, at the most senior and strategic level of decision making that you won't typically get in a mid-level position in an organization in a country like South Africa. So I think a big selling point in attracting, it really gives people meaning. It gives people power, which sometimes for some people is really important. It might not be important for all of us, but the ability to meet the president and the ability to meet ministers and engage at that level, I think is a big selling point in attracting people back as well.
Yeah, I think you don't get that opportunity elsewhere. So I think, yeah, it's a great selling point. Cool. And then maybe just to finish off before we move into the Q&A section of today, Bess, what advice would you give to someone in the African continent starting out their career? What advice would you give to them? And, what would you tell them about the African future?
Thank you, Megan. The African future is great, guys. Africa is still has a lot of untapped development, untapped business opportunities, untapped growth. So I would say anyone starting their careers, check what the market requires and align your career to the market need. You can make a difference, but also be authentic. Do something that you are passionate about, that you feel you will go in there and make a difference, because there'll be times where the job will be so difficult and you wonder, why did I take this job? I can tell you, we've had engineers who've had to drive in very difficult terrains where there are no roads, where there's no infrastructure, but they have to go out and fix the network. The network has to work. The community has to have access to that network. So you need to be passionate. You need to have goals and ambitions. You need to want to make a difference and need to be clear about your career path and how you will achieve it. Also, network. Find people who are doing similar jobs. Ask them to coach you, to mentor you, and make sure that you use your networks. Do not be afraid to be part of communities, part of societies, whether it is the engineering board, whatever board, the HR board. Go into those communities, learn more, network, meet other people, because meeting other people also opens doors. It's not only looking internally and being groomed internally, but externally, it is important that you are also known within your own market, that you add value, that you make a difference. And I always say, get the basics right. What do I mean by getting the basics right? Make sure that you deliver on the current job that you are assigned to. If I am expected to deliver X number of sales, make sure that you deliver it and more. Exceed the expectations. Come up with, be innovative in the way you do your work. Deliver ahead of time. Be one of those people that is reliable and a trusted advisor in the organization. If your leader cannot trust you to deliver, you will not grow in your career. If your leader cannot trust you to do what is expected, you will not grow in your career. That's what I'm saying. It starts with the basic. Respect the current level that you are at. Respect the work that you've been given, and do it well. If you expect promotion, you will only get it once you've proven yourself that you are capable of doing what you are able to do, and even do more, and you are a trusted advisor. So those are some of the advice that I can give people. Some people want jobs, but they do not actually want to take responsibility in delivering. If you've committed at least 8 hours of work a day, do that 8 hours, and if possible, if you can do more, do more. It will help you grow your career. It will help you access higher jobs and do a lot of networking. It helps. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nicole, anything you would add to that, or any additional advice you would give?
So, just two small things. Time flies, and your reputation matters. The market, although big from a geographical point of view, the market is small. The world is a small place. So always do the right thing. That's what I would add and I'll come back to one of the other questions that's been posted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, thanks so much, guys. Thank you for sharing and providing us with your knowledge and insight. It's been really valuable and inspiring. We're going to jump onto some questions from the audience. The first question comes from Milton, and he said, how can the issue of salaries be addressed, as this is a major advantage for international companies and a great way for them to kind of attract African talent who may not be earning the same amount in Africa. So what can we do to kind of, work against this?
So, Megan, I'm happy to take that. Milton, it's such a... I know of many people across the continent that get paid substantially more than people in Europe, Asia, and America. Salaries matter, and it's a hygiene factor. And as an incumbent, you also need to ask yourself the question, why am I potentially being offered this sum of money? What is it that I potentially need to go fix? Secondly, money is not everything, right? I often say it's easy to say that traveling is overrated if you've traveled and if you've seen the world. Like, I often feel like people that have a lot of money in the bank account will say, "Oh, money is overrated." It's because you've got a lot of money, right? I think people need to understand what's important to them and what is it that matters most to them. And if purpose is more important than money, then that alignment will be created. I've come to realize that more money in life is not going to create a higher level of happiness. There's a point that you reach where an extra $1 million or $2 extra million or 10 extra dollars is not going to make a difference in your happiness levels. I think it's about making sure that value is created, that if a value is created, compensation will follow. The drive should not be money, but often around the world, and this is not unique to Africa, the drive is around money. Like, how much are you going to pay me? I would then further say opportunity, Milton. The access that Dion spoke about. They spoke about mobility in the group, the footprint that they have, the ability to be moved to other locations. What does that matter, and how does that play a role for you as an individual? So there's multiple components here. Once again, from that pyramid that I spoke about, the salaries kind of form the basis. I mean, that needs to be right, but it also necessarily doesn't need to be excessive from that point of view. And I want to say, make sure that whatever you do, you find that level of alignment, value, and purpose in the organization that you work for.
Nicole, if I can add to that, I think I totally agree that the purpose is really critical. What we've seen from many of the clients, because it's not that prevalent on the African continent, is also how you potentially go in with a reasonable and affordable base pay and place more pay at senior levels at risk. So certainly we are not seeing a lot of clients investing in long-term incentive plans, deferred payments. It's not prevalent across the continent unless you come from a multinational. And so we've seen a big uptick in that kind of work. And so the question is, if you are going to be part of the success of the organization, how do we potentially go in with an appropriate base pay that might not be excessive, but make sure that if you deliver results, we pay you at an appropriate level through deferred compensation? I think, that would be really, really important. And we apply that principle in our own organization. So, we as a startup might not be the highest paying company in terms of guaranteed pay, but we make sure that if you are delivering what you're supposed to, that there is a commission deferred payment that could put you in a better position than what you potentially would be in many other companies. So it's the balance of EVP, EX, pay, purpose, all those kind of elements. But I would also just add and say, really look at how do you defer payment linked to performance and success.
Okay, thank you. Something that just came up in the chat is from Victor. He said, salary matters should be standard, the same salary for the same function wherever you work. And whilst I do agree with that in an ideal world, I think that's quite difficult to achieve, specifically with different standards of living across different continents. So, for example, in the UK, you may be paid a little bit more for what you do. However, maybe rent or groceries or transport is a lot more expensive. So I think that is quite a difficult thing to capture. Any thoughts on that?
Nicole, Megan, sorry. Yeah, salary matters should be standard within that country, right? Because you need to understand the nuances and the economical and the standard living of that country and the cost of living. So typically, we as an organization, we do salary surveys and ensure that our salaries are within the market ranges. Even still, then you will never get it 100% correct, because depending on the person's skills, knowledge, and experience, and the type of skill that you're attracting, the salaries will differ. Technical skills typically get paid more than your soft skills. It's a reality in the market because of the shortages of skills. And also, we also take a stance to say, if we're looking for a scarce skill, we are prepared to pay anything from the 75th percentile, even over the 100th percentile. So you will never exactly get salaries 100%. But what is important is that you are paid within the salary scale. Your base salary should be within the salary scale. And as Dion rightfully said, we don't only look at the base salary, it's about how do we add variable components into your salary that will also make a difference in paying you. So we also provide short-term incentives, long-term incentives, which get paid annually. We also provide benefits such as medical aid, pension funds. We also have what we call a lifestyle benefit, which is a great benefit that you can use to go on holiday, book your family and go on holiday with. And, so we have got various components within our basket of remuneration, some variable, some fixed. But that helps a lot in terms of remunerating our employees. We also, from time to time, I mean, COVID has also been very difficult on some of our employees, particularly the lower levels, where we would decide we're just going to give them this month a once of $500, for example. Those are some of the things. So we're always monitoring the market to say what is happening with our employees, what is happening within that country. We also have countries where hyperinflation is a huge issue, especially in North Africa, Middle East Africa. They have huge problems with hyperinflation. We continuously need to revisit those salary scales to say, how do we align our employees to addressing the challenges they have with hyperinflation? Do we assist them? What we're doing now is that we've created a platform where we bring on suppliers. Because we've got a vast number of employees, we can bring on suppliers, and we speak, for example, call a Pick n Pay and say, Pick n Pay, supply our employees with good rates. Let them buy groceries from you. So those are some of the initiatives we're now coming up in each different market. How can we make our employees' lives easier? Can we procure petrol for them so that they can get to work, at a cheaper rate? So it's not only about the salary, but it's also about the added benefits and other little things that we can do, which are variable, that can assist employees. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's super insightful. Tunde commented that no continent is talent subsistent, so there's no harm in having expats in Africa and having Africans abroad. What do you guys think of this? Do you think, this is the way of the future and, there's some give and take?
Yeah, I think the balance is important. I mean, it's more difficult explaining that to a government official that needs to provide a work permit. Of course, they take a very different view. But I think we're in a global society, and what COVID has enabled us to do is to work from anywhere. So our company, as an example, we don't have offices. Even if we have 100 people, our intention is never ever to have offices. And we've been working with a client in Nigeria in a tech startup recently, and they have executive members sitting in the UK, in Lagos, all over. We work with a company in the steel manufacturing industry that doesn't have a head office. The Exco team is split between Doha, in the DRC, in Kenya. So I do also think that we really need to be thinking about how we embrace remote working and work from home principles. Of course, when you start, working in Africa and you want to work from a location in the US, the time zone complexity is quite severe. But there really is a massive, massive opportunity to embrace remote working and really make it a global village. It's sad for me, though, that many companies have started to force people to go back to the office. And I've seen it again recently where, a company has given people a deadline, literally last week, Friday, to say that everybody needs to be back in the office on Monday. First of all, it's not reasonable to expect people to be back over a weekend. And secondly, it really doesn't add to the kind of the profile of the kind of employees that you want to attract in the future. So I tend to agree to a certain extent that it need not be a big issue if you have the right kind of work models. And I think there's an opportunity, probably one of the few opportunities that COVID has given us, to really fast track more progressive ways of working, where people work, how people work, and when people work. So in our organization as well, we've done away with leave practices. We've done away with working hours. As long as you can achieve your targets, I don't care whether you sit at a coffee shop, at a hotel, at your house, just manage what you need to produce. That's what we're driven by. And I think it's a key principle that many organizations should consider.
I totally agree. And I think Elon Musk made a comment that everyone at his company needs to be back at work, and then the rest of the world followed suit. But yes, I think that one of the advantages of remote working is more work-life balance, is more travel, whilst the upside is a lot more productivity in some cases. So it's definitely a very relevant topic. And to just insist everyone's back at work from 8 to 5 going forward may be a little bit ignorant to how we've experienced the past few years. So that's definitely something to consider. Cool. Any other particular questions or comments that you as the panel want to address or that you've seen? I think we've addressed quite a lot of the pertinent ones.
A lot of questions about compensation. I think that's really where Nicole fits in with his skill set. So I see a lot of questions around compensation, the need to manage appropriately. I think there was also a question around earlier on, and that might be an appropriate one for Nicole to think about, expatriate compensation relative to local compensation and how to manage that effectively, because it's a bit of a conundrum when you have an expat, and especially if they have to return to a home base at a lower salary. So Nicole, it might be appropriate just to spend a moment talking about expat compensation versus local compensation, and I guess how you manage the dynamics of it.
Yeah, so it is I want to say complex. It can be a complex scientific field. And I'm just trying to think that the shortest way that I can say is companies are always willing to pay more if your skill set, capabilities, and competencies align to their strategic intent. If you want to make a lot of money, make sure that your skill set aligns to an organization's strategy. And often these assignees will be brought in for a short period of time to come and execute, and is kind of expecting a significant premium to what they would be accustomed to. Cost of living adjustments, quality of living adjustments, compensation for being taken out of their home environment. But for many people, this is also an adventure. They want to go live somewhere else. They want to be exposed to new markets and new opportunities. So it really is. It is a complex field. It can be very nuanced. talking about tax legislation, companies or family, children. What if there's divorced family, multiple families? If there's a special needs person that is in a specific situation or an environment, it is really quite complex, and I fear I might not be able to do it justice in a very short space of time. These differences do exist, as do pay differences exist in organizations and across countries and across continents. So it is the ability to, I want to say, work within the friction that is a reality in the world in which we live.
Nicely said. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time. We really appreciate the amazing comments and thoughts and questions we've received. And thank you to our prestigious panel for all the insight you've given us today. Any kind of closing thoughts or comments any of you would like to make before we sign off?
Megan, from myself, I'd really like to encourage people to come home. Africa is home, and if we are to make a difference in the continent, it takes you and I to come home and make a difference. I know it's very easy for most Africans to relocate and live in the US or UK because life is much easier. There's infrastructure, there's better schooling, there's everything. Why don't we learn what we learn from the US and the UK and bring it back and build our African continent? It is not up to one person or one organization to bring a change in Africa, but it's going to take all of us to bring that change. And we need to lead by example to the younger generation to say, we still believe in Africa. We still believe that Africa can grow, become a better continent, become economically strong, and succeed in all ways if we are the ones who come back and make the difference. Why don't you come home and build that better school in your community? Why don't you come home and build a Google in your community? There is lots of potential for Africa and Africans. And I would really urge and say, let us think about what we're doing. It's very easy for us to work overseas, but Africa matters. Our people matters. And we are the only ones who can bring the change in the continents, do away with the wars, do away with the greed, whatever is happening on the continent. It will take me and you to make that difference if we believe in what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth. Dion,
Maybe I think a final comment from me is more for the HR practitioners on the call, is to really reflect on what is your role in this process. What I often find is that HR practitioners and human capital practitioners are bogged down in a lot of admin, a lot of red tape that we often create ourselves. And we've really got to reposition our role to be talent champions, culture champions, EX champions. So these kind of conversations always, make me think about what is the role that we need to play and what do we need to get rid of, and what are some of the mind shifts that are required for us to be more effective at what we do. So that'll be my challenge specifically for the human resources professionals.
Great. Thank you so much. Nicole?
So I have a professor that said, what got us here will not get us there. So I also like Mahatma Gandhi saying that be the change that you want to be that you want to see in the world. Right, so I agree with what Bess has said. It's up to us to make the change. Can't wait for someone else, but it's up to us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your time and effort. It was lovely chatting to you. And thanks to the audience for your great participation and engagement. We appreciate it. Bye, everyone.